invite to come and speak to you today. A little over a year ago, or maybe a little less than a year ago, that the first time I addressed this group at a luncheon, and I was in office for probably about 6 weeks. We had just finished up the spring of 2012 session, and it was an eye-opening experience for me. We went down there with a lot of issues unresolved, one being the pension crisis that was facing Illinois. As many of you know, that bill was passed here this last December. It does face a court challenge, but moving forward, we're going to see what the courts say. If they prove it unconstitutional, we'll be given a roadmap by the justices that will give us the availability to come out with a pension reform system that should pass constitutional muster. And if it's proven constitutional, we'll start seeing some savings right off the get-go. So getting right into what we're here to address today is what's coming up in Springfield this session. Going into an election year, the mantra, at least in the House of Representatives, is when you get in the first year of a General Assembly, you're doing a lot of member initiatives, a lot of bills that are dealing with issues that are affecting home. When you get into the election years of the session, you're doing more budgetary issues. And that's pretty much what we're going to be focusing on the next 3-4 months that we're in session. As my colleagues from the Senate had stated, we're going to see a budget shortfall this year. On the House side, because we use different numbers than the Senate does, we're expecting about a $1.2 to $1.6 billion shortfall from last year's revenues. So basically what we're doing in the House is the income tax that was passed in 2011 is set to expire on January 1st of 2015. We are not budgeting for that income tax staying in place. We're budgeting for it to expire. The second thing that we're budgeting for or budgeting without is the pension savings. There were projections of $1.2 to $1.6 billion in savings in this pension bill that would be budgetary relief. We are not budgeting for those. So we're taking the money that's at hand when we get our numbers from Kafka. Once we get those numbers and set that resolution, that's the number we're going to go off of. So you say, what's $1.2 billion do for our spending obligations and our services that we need for this upcoming fiscal year? Pretty much we're going to be looking at some pretty drastic cuts across the board. And unfortunately, that's not something that a lot of our organizations here, especially at home, whether it's our social services, our education, or our public safety, really want to hear. But those are the facts. What we need to do is figure out how do we, one, address this issue, and two, where do we go forward? So in the waning days of the veto session, there was some tax credit bills that came up. One is specifically dealing with ADM, that we're going to give a tax credit to ADM to move their headquarters from Decatur to Chicago. That passed the Senate and it did not get called in the House. The other one was the Office Depot Office Max tax credit that also passed the Senate, did not get called in the House. And the clamor was that what are we giving these tax credits to multi-billion-dollar corporations while small businesses and mid-sized corporations are hurting? And we're just helping them to do a move on the taxpayer expense. I have to give credit where credit's due. Speaker Madigan called our Revenue and Finance Committee and our State Government Administration Committee to basically join together. And what they've done, and it started back on January 17th, I believe, they formed a joint committee, and what they're doing is they're reviewing and going to come up with recommendations on tax policy and incentives. This is a joint committee, and basically everybody's been invited to the table. I was at their first hearing up at the Blandick building in Chicago, and everything's out in the open. If you have suggestions, if you have initiatives, if you have ideas on how we should go forward as a state for revenue generation and how do we incentivize business growth, this is the committee you want to seek and address. Because they're going to come out with a solution or a recommendation that's going to go forward and somehow end up being heard by the General Assembly. This tax issue, whether the income tax is extended, whether it's made permanent, whether it goes away, my colleague in the Senate talked about a progressive income tax. I am a co-sponsor on that also, but basically, and this is how I'll put it, right now we're facing the income tax at a flat rate. We can have our legislators in the lame duck vote to extend that, we can vote to make it permanent, or we could give the people of the state of Illinois a choice on how they want to go forward. By putting this question, if this amendment were to pass, or this resolution were to pass the chambers, every voter in the state of Illinois would have a say on how our tax policy goes. And there's no graduated tax set in place, there's no numbers. I know there's a lot of information going around that everybody's taxes will go up. There's nothing been stated in that scenario that would make that true. Basically what this question does is give every voter in the state of Illinois the ability to say yes or no to a progressive income tax. And if the voters say no, then it's a dead issue, we stay on a flat tax. If they say yes, then we can sit down and talk about what those rates may be. So just so there's clarification there, that just because the talk is of creating one, doesn't mean it's set in stone. But on a local level now, I've been working on, first and foremost, is a blue ribbon panel that I put together dealing with the I-55 Des River Bridge. As many know, last year we had that construction on the southbound lanes where they had that bridge out and everything was down to 2 lanes. And unfortunately, we had way too many incidences of accidents and we had 2 fatalities. So we got word from IDOT late last year, around September, October, that they weren't going to finish the whole project, that they were going to open up the southbound lanes, and in April of this year, weather permitting, they're going to shut down the northbound lanes and do the same thing. So we put this blue ribbon panel together with IDOT, with my fellow colleagues from the Senate and the House, the first responders, the fire departments and police and the media, to try to get awareness, to come up with some solutions, some ideas on how we can better put this construction, this dangerous construction zone, and make it safer. And we've had 2 meetings so far. They've been very good. One of the things is they're looking at is real-time information to warn drivers as they're approaching that construction site what the traffic is like ahead, if it's stopped, if it's delayed, if it's slow, if you're moving along fairly well. There's going to be then flashing billboards along there. The notification and alternative routes are already out there. And the main focus, one, was to get the truckers aware of this area. So notification to the Midwest Trucking Association, the Illinois Truckers Association has been made, and they're supposed to be putting their press releases out in this month's issues of their publications. So hopefully, pray to God that this summer construction season, we're going to see less incidences at that construction zone. With my area being the 86th district, I have the 2 intermodal facilities that fit in Joliet. And the biggest thing we're facing right now is huge transportation needs. And as Senator McGuire had stated, we're working diligently on the Ileana, and it's moving forward at an expeditious pace. The RFPs are out. We have 4 bidders that they finalized down to 4 bidders, and that process is moving along. Hopefully by the end of 2015 and 2016, we'd be looking at moving dirt on that. And then Tuesday, just this past Tuesday, I flew out to Washington, D.C. Last year, we passed Senate Bill 20, which created the governance, it settled the governance issue with the 3rd airport. Creating a P3, a public-private partnership for the operation, maintenance, and development of the Peatone Airport. And as we move along, IDOT has gotten all the reports that they need into the FAA, and I sat down with colleagues from mine from South Cook and that area that's affected by the Peatone Airport, and we had a meeting with the Secretary of Transportation, John Fox, and the head of the FAA about the importance of moving this project along. And we had I'm going to tell you, I was surprised we were all on the same page. We had a consensus that says everybody in the area is wanting it. They know it's there. let's get the record of decision and let's move this project forward. So very promising news. I think there's going to be a lot of growth here within the next 5, 10, 15 years, and we're starting to see that blueprint laid out. So I'm hopeful that our area is going to be booming here in the next few years. With that, I'd like to again thank you for having me and entertain any questions afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry.